First of all, welcome everybody. We're really glad to have you with us. As you know, we're talking about Social Security, and Dan led us into with that really good joke into our topic today. So I'm Amy Akmoody. I'm an associate advisor here at Flagstone and joined by our lead planner, Dan Staus. So thanks for joining us. I want to throw out a disclaimer quickly, and that is that Flagstone Financial Management is a registered investment advisor. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and/or tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed in this webinar. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. All right, Dan, let's get started. And any jokes are always welcome. So
yeah, I don't know if I'm going to have any more. That was kind of the exhaustion of the Social Security jokes that exist in the universe. But all right. So as I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, I wanted to just address the three kind of primer questions that we had in the invitation email. So I thought I'd just kind of go through those one by one. The first topic that I wanted to discuss related to Social Security is, should you claim early or should you wait and delay? A lot of people know that if you claim early, you get a reduced benefit. If you wait to claim until the latest possible age, which is 70, then you get a larger benefit. And there's a spectrum there. It's not like you have to do it either at the earliest possible or latest possible. You can do it anywhere in between there. So when you think about how many potential options there are for a married couple who are both eligible for Social Security, there's actually 81 possible claiming strategies. So it's not just a simple, I've got three choices, let me choose one of these three. There's quite a few for married couples, and even for a single person, there's a lot, because you can claim, at any number of months in between those age ranges. So there's a lot. Well, so what do you consider when you're gonna make the decision of claiming early versus late? Well, your expected mortality is a big part of it. So if you were retired and you were 64 and you thought you were going to die by the time you were 68 years old, well, probably makes sense to claim earlier than later. If you were planning to delay until age 70, but you died at age 68, you probably didn't come out ahead in that transaction. If you're projected to have a long life and collect Social Security for a long time, then that is more reason to delay. So that's one thing to consider. Another factor is, how aggressive is your portfolio? So why does your investment portfolio matter when it comes to Social Security? Well, for a lot of folks, they've got when they retire and they don't have an employment check anymore, then they've got two sources of money to pay for the bills. They've got this Social Security check that's going to come in every month, and then they also have this pile of money that they've saved over the past several decades, and it might be in an IRA or a Roth IRA or a 403B or a non-retirement investment portfolio. So income stream, Social Security, and a pile of cash to pay for the expenses. Well, if you're not pulling from the Social Security income stream yet, and you're going to delay, then you have to take money out of this portfolio. Well, if you're taking money out of the portfolio, then you're not getting any growth on that chunk of money you're pulling out. So you're sacrificing growth. Well, how much growth are you sacrificing? That's why it matters how it's invested. If you've got this really aggressive portfolio and you're pulling money out of it and it's got a high projected return, then you're sacrificing more growth. If it's super conservatively invested and you're pulling money out, then you're not sacrificing as much return, because you didn't think that portfolio was going to grow all that much anyway. So that comes into play when you're crunching the numbers on take Social Security versus take money out of my investment portfolio. Another thing to consider is your spouse's expected mortality, their age, and their projected benefit. So this is where it gets a little more complicated, particularly because there are those 81 possible strategies I talked about. But those things matter for a number of reasons, and I'll give you an example and a common thing that we see. So let's say your spouse earned a lot of money almost their entire career. So let's say they were a physician, earned hundreds of thousands of dollars for decades, and their projected Social Security benefit is going to be pretty big compared to yours. Let's say you either worked part-time, or you took care of the kids, or you had a full-time job. It just wasn't a physician's salary, so just wasn't as high. Well, a lot of times in that scenario, it makes some sense to have the high earner, your spouse, delay until the latest possible year, and for you to claim earlier. Because when a spouse dies, their surviving spouse gets the higher of the two benefits. So in my example, if your spouse, let's say they delayed till 70, because their benefit was going to be a lot, and then they died at 71, well, you're going to get that higher benefit now that they're gone. So it's not like you only got that benefit for 1 year. You're going to get the benefit of them delaying for the rest of your life as well. That's an oversimplified example. And, if you're in that situation, don't just come away from this saying, we need to delay the higher earner and claim early on the lower earner. There's other factors, but that is one thing that affects the strategy. So all those things are things that you should consider when claiming early versus late. Amy, are there any questions specifically related to that factor, like claiming early versus delaying, before I get into some of the other things?
No, there are not any so far.
Okay. I'll move on to the next one then, which is, will Social Security be there when I am retired and I want to claim my Social Security income? One of the things that was in the headlines recently is that the Social Security Trust Fund trustees released their annual report. So they do this every year. But the report said that they think that the trust fund is going to dry up in 2033. It was a headline because everyone was wondering if that year would change because of the pandemic. And it didn't actually change all that much. Sadly, it's because a lot of people died during COVID and won't actually ever claim their Social Security, so the government doesn't have to pay that anymore. Yeah, projected to dry up in 2033. So for someone who's getting, let's say, $30,000 a year in Social Security, does that mean that in 2033 they're going to go from $30,000 a year to zero? Probably not. In the trustee report, it also said that money that's coming in to the trust fund will pay out 76%, or will pay for 76% of what's projected to go out. So kind of worst case realistic scenario is that that person who's getting $30,000 a year would just get a 24% reduction in their paycheck. And that would still suck, but it's not going from 30,000 to zero, at least not projected to. And the reason I kind of say it's worst case is because historically Congress has shored up that trust fund. So, it's going to dry up and people's benefits will be reduced if Congress does nothing. But historically, they have done something. I think, and it's the general opinion of the advisors here at Flagstone, that the government will probably shore up the trust fund for folks who, are close to that age of claiming. Maybe the people who are 50 or 55 and older today, maybe they don't have to worry about their benefits being reduced. So why do we think that? Well, think about what happened last year with the pandemic. So Congress saw this need for businesses and individuals to get some financial support because of COVID. And so they came together and they did that, paid out tons and tons of money in new commitments to people to keep the economy afloat. And that was all, I say new commitments. It wasn't like 5 years ago, Congress said, well, if a pandemic happens, we're going to do a paycheck protection program and keep people employed. And we're also going to increase unemployment. Like, it was all new. They hadn't previously committed to it. Now, contrast that with Social Security, particularly someone who's already claiming, and the government has committed to spending that money and giving out this monthly benefit to those people. I think it's unlikely that they would just say, we committed to it, but just kidding, we're going to reduce your benefit by 24%. I just don't think that's likely. I think it's more likely that for people like me who are 35, I think the government might say, hey, Dan, we told you you're going to get $30,000 a year in Social Security benefits when you retire, but actually, when you turn 65, you're only going to get $25,000 or whatever. I'm just making up numbers here, but I think that's more likely. So the younger workers like me might be affected, but that older workers probably wouldn't have a change in their benefits. I'm totally, like, predicting the future is not possible, but I think that's my guess, and it's kind of a general opinion of the Flagstone advisors. So when we do plans for younger folks, we do reduce Social Security benefits by 25% just to see if the financial plan can support that. But we don't commonly do that for someone who's like 60 because we just don't think it's likely. I mean, if the client wants to see their financial plan with a reduced benefit, absolutely we'll do that, but it's not something that we're as concerned about. Any questions on the trust fund drying up before I go to the third and final question?
There are no questions on that, but I do want to point out that I did, if you didn't hear this in the beginning, I did post a blog link that Dan wrote in the chat. So feel free to take a look at that after our webinar. And if you have questions on anything in that too, you can sure reach out to us. But no questions so far, Dan.
Okay, and we will publish this on YouTube when we are done, and then we'll send out a link to the recording. And we'll have a link to the blog in that recording too. So, all right, the last question here. Will my ex-spouse's benefit be impacted by my claiming strategy? So here's what I mean by that. Husband and wife get divorced at age 50. And let's say the wife was the higher earner of the two, and the husband comes to Flagstone, he becomes a client, and he's like, hey, I think it's time for me to claim Social Security, but I don't want to make my ex-wife mad and affect her benefit, so maybe I should delay. Well, that's just not going to happen. An ex-spouse can claim an ex-spouse benefit, and their ex-spouse their benefit does not get affected. I had a weird, rather unique question one time where someone thought that was the case, and I explained, I told them, well, it's not really how it works. And they said, well, in my state, because they weren't from Nebraska, they were like, well, in my state, the rules are different, actually. Well, the rules were not different in that state. Social Security is a federal benefit, so sometimes there's differences on how states tax that income, but states don't have a ton of power to just like change this federal benefit. That said, I'm not an expert in every state's rules, but that was a unique question that someone had, and that just kind of brings me to the final overarching comment that I want to make, is that Social Security is super widely misunderstood by lots of people, and a big problem or contributor to that is that most people are going to get Social Security. So, it's a common topic for folks to discuss when they're 63 years old and they're having coffee with their friends on Saturday morning, or they're talking to their neighbor in the evening after work, and they're talking about, what are you going to do with Social Security? Well, my advisor told me to claim early because Social Security fund is going to dry up, or my advisor told me to delay it. It would never make sense to claim early. Like, there are very unique circumstances for most people. And that's why I think it really warrants a discussion that's unique to the individual on when should you claim. So, when we consider these decisions for folks in the context of a financial plan, we look at it from a ton of different angles. So if you're a client and you're curious about when you should claim, and we haven't already had the discussion, let us know. We're pretty proactive about initiating those conversations for people who are close to the claiming age. But if you're younger and we haven't talked about it yet, but you're curious, let us know. If you're not a client, then we'd be happy to talk with you about whether it makes sense to do a financial plan and look at Social Security claiming strategies, whether it makes sense to work with us. So yeah, I just thought I'd kind of end with that warning of don't listen to what listen to what your friends and family are doing. Be curious about it, but don't make a decision just because your friend did it or because of what someone without experience is telling you that you should do. Any other questions then, Amy?
No, there aren't any questions about Social Security. I think what you said is great advice, though, about, people will share their experiences about what they have, and those are great conversations to have. But like you said, there are so many options that it's great to talk to your financial advisor. So we recommend that. As far as a conversation, or I'm sorry, as far as questions, if you have a question, feel free to ask it in the chat box. There are a couple questions outside of Social Security, Dan, so I'm going to pose those to you. And questions can keep coming, so feel free. But one of the first questions that I received was, my husband and I are both retired and fully funding our lifestyle from Social Security and investment distributions. We need a new car. Is it best to withdraw a lump sum from my investments or monthly distributions to pay for a loan at 3%?
That's a good question. And it's actually, I think I wrote a blog article addressing that question too. For if someone wants to know even more, they can search for that on our blog portion of our website. But one of the big things to consider is like, what's the interest rate compared to what's your expected return in your account. So no, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier about if you have an aggressive portfolio that's projected to earn a lot, and you take more money out of that, then you're sacrificing return. So usually on car loans, because of how rates are right now, they're really low. If you just do the math, then it does make sense to just pay for that with a loan and then pay it off over time, pay off that loan over time, because the interest rates are lower than your expected return in your portfolio. With that said, if you have a super conservative portfolio, maybe the interest rate is actually higher than what your portfolio might earn. So, so I can't say that like with a blanket statement that you should get a loan for the majority of it. But then there's non-numbers related things. So how do you feel about having debt? Like, are you someone who really hates debt, who just can't stand having that $35,000 car loan and it like makes you anxious? Well, maybe you don't come out ahead money-wise by just paying for it in cash and taking all that money out of your IRA. But maybe what that cost you is worth the emotional benefit of not having a car loan. So that's something to consider as well.
Thank you, Dan. And let's see. I want to get more serious about a budget in order to save for the things that are important to me. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I have a ton of tips. I am kind of the resident budget expert here at Flagstone. I would direct you to, well, I've got like 3 or 4 budgeting tips articles on our website, on our blog, so you can hear my personal thoughts on that. But another great resource is youneedabudget.com. They have, in my opinion, it's the best budgeting software out there. It costs some money, but I think it's totally worth it. It's only like, if you convert it to a monthly expense, I think it's like $7 a month. So the software is awesome. Basically a digital version of the envelope system. I won't get into that, but if you're familiar with the envelope system, that's kind of what YNAB is like, except it avoids the hassle of having tons of envelopes with literal cash in them. But then there's also a lot of great content on their website about how to think about budgeting, not just their software. So I would say check out that website. And then maybe lastly, one like tangible tip would be to have a budget that reflects your values and that is so that you're spending intentionally on the things that you value. What most often happens with a bad budget is that it puts money towards things that you don't actually care about. And you're just paying for things because they've kind of happened to you. What I love to see with clients is that they've said, hey, I really value making memories with my family. So we're going to put a bunch of money towards things that create long-term memories for my family. Or conversely, we have some clients who are like, I just love our house and spending time at home. We are total homebodies. So we want to make our home experience the best possible home experience. So they decide to spend a larger percentage on home related things, whether it's the house itself or decor or, things that make cleaning easier or cooking easier. So, have a budget that reflects your values, I guess is the bottom line.
Yeah, very good advice. Well, that's it.